Now, before we get started, I do want to give a shout out to Tony. He's the individual who sent me the video for the Iraqi UFO probe. I wanted to give him a shout out, but I lost his email. I wasn't able to find it. And I gave him a shout out in a live video, but it was like 20 minutes into it. So I'm not sure if he even saw it or whatever. So just to make sure, here's your shout out, Tony. Thank you for giving me that video. All right. Today we're going to be discussing the Gulf Breeze sightings, a UFO incident that took place over 3 years between 1987 and 1990, pertaining particularly around one individual, Ed Walters, along with his wife, Frances. So one day in November 11th, 1987, Ed is doing some work late night and he sees this light coming from his yard. So he goes to the blinds to the window and he looks out to get a better vantage point, and he sees this glowing object that's partially covered by these 30-foot tall pine trees in his front yard. So he races outside to get a better view of the object, and he's taken back. He's shocked at the sight before him. He was staring at an object with the shape of a top. It had a row of dark squares which were separated by portals between them. The craft seemed to hover just above the road, showing a glowing ring around its bottom. Ed ran into the house, grabbed his Polaroid camera, and he snapped off several photos of the craft before deciding to get even closer, so he headed into the road. As he paused in the street to take more photos of the strange object, it began to hover almost directly over his head. Walters was then hit by a bright bluish beam which shot from the object. He was literally lifted from the ground by its force. It was then he heard a voice say, "Don't worry, we will not harm you." Images began to enter his mind. He said they were like pictures from a book. However, these mental pictures he was getting pictures of naked women. He didn't understand why. But then at the same time, the pictures started to not make sense. Some of them were really pretty women, but then some of them were older women. Some of them were pregnant women. Some of them were even dead women. So what the fuck does that mean? Did the aliens like not understand how to, calm someone down? They just like show them some naked women and they just show them pictures of any kind of naked woman. It just, that's just interesting. This is what he said. He said, "Bang, something hit me all over my body. I tried to lift my arms. I couldn't move them. They were blue. I was blue. Everything was blue. I was in a blue beam of light. I was trying to breathe, but my chest wouldn't expand. My feet lifted off the floor. A voice groaned in my head. 'We will not harm you.' I screamed. The voice said, 'Calm down.' I screamed, 'Put me down.' No control, just a piercing smell. A little scent of ammonia mixed with heavy cinnamon that scorched, then stuck to the back of my throat. A hum filled my head. Wham! I hit the ground. The blue light was gone. The hum was still in my head, but quickly decreased and was gone." Now, he gives these, that's his description. He wrote a book, obviously, and he goes and gives his pictures to the newspaper and, saying they're from a person named Mr. X, but that was short-lived because they, the story, the pictures, everything took off, and he admitted that it was him. All right. Now his credibility came under fire, but everyone who knew him in town knew him as a trustworthy man, an honest man, and his wife Frances was his most loyal and unwavering partner. So on November 20th, Ed is sitting at home and he starts hearing this hum in his head. And it was the same hum that he was left with from his first encounter. And he just had this feeling that he needed to go outside. And when he goes outside, he sees this point of light in the sky. Then it comes down super fast, and it's this craft hovering right over him. And he takes a picture of it. Then on December 2nd, another time, he hears the hum again, and another UFO incident. Of course, this time it has to do, there's no alien craft. He hears the hum. He goes to his window and from his bedroom goes to the French doors, looks out the blinds, and he sees this gray alien staring right back at him, just looking dead into its eyes. And it appears to be wearing some kind of suit of armor. And Ed was overcome by fear. He freaked out and he fell down and he started crawling backwards on the floor. And this alien's wearing this armor, just looking at him. It's got like this weird glowing silver rod in its hand, and he doesn't know what to do, and he's screaming. His wife wakes up and she sees it, and he's got a gun. by his bed, and he leans over and grabs it and points it at the creature, but the creature doesn't move. It doesn't do anything. It just stares directly at his eyes. And he said he was too afraid to even pull the trigger. And he said then the creature turned to the side and just walked away as if nothing happened. He said the gun didn't scare him. He didn't scare him, nothing. He just walked away. And he was really pissed at this point. So he's like, this little motherfucker. And he runs outside, and he goes to chase it. And he's hit with the blue beam again, and he can't move his legs, but the top of his body falls over. So it's just like his legs were paralyzed. And then he can see like the craft out in the field by his house, and a blue beam shoot down into the field and then turn off. And he thinks it was picking up the little alien. And then one day he's getting the hum again, and he's running outside. And he's taking a shower this time. He's getting a hum. He's going crazy. He's like, why won't they leave me alone? He goes out there, and he runs out in his bath towel and starts screaming at this UFO when he sees it out there. And the UFO in his head said, he heard a voice say, "Do not resist, Zehas," like that was a name or a word or something. He could even hear other people, other humans, like talking to each other, but they weren't speaking English. They were speaking Spanish. And they were saying stuff like, why do they keep feeding us bananas? Shit like that, just the weirdest fucking things. Now, the thing is that the overwhelming evidence in the Gulf Breeze case it's not just from Ed Walters, even though that's where it all like focuses on, because the fact is during that time there were so many other reports of this UFO being sighted by other people who had nothing to do with the case. And it basically split the UFO community down the middle, with half believing it and half rejecting it. And so some of the people from MUFON went and investigated. At first, they agreed it was a true case, and then some other people came back and investigated and said, no, it's not. And everyone was kind of split down the middle. And but that's not counting all the other people who witnessed the craft too. So MUFON gave him cameras to take pictures of craft or whatever, so they couldn't be faked. Now, he didn't get any pictures of the actual craft that he took, but pictures of other UFOs that were coming around. So, I mean, who knows what that means. Now, one of the problems is that people were out to discredit him, of course, debunkers like myself. And but the problem is some of the stuff that happened just makes you think that, okay, well, this doesn't seem legitimate. Something must be up if people are going through this length. So he sold his house and he moved into a new house, all right? And his old house had been up for sale for a year, and then someone else came and bought the house and moved in. And then one day a reporter shows up to the new house and says, hey, have you ever found anything unusual in this house? And the guy says, well, as a matter of fact, yes, I have. I was working on some pipes for my water, and I'm up in the attic and I'm moving some insulation around, and I found this little model of what looks like a UFO. And the reporter's like, oh my God, that's, the model of the UFO, obviously, that Ed Walters used to photograph and make a fake of. So bam, he's busted, and they put that out. However, when that was actually thoroughly investigated, it turns out that it was also found with schematics from a housing project that Ed was working on. So they're like, oh yeah, these go together. But the schematics were for a year after Ed had already moved out of the house. So that means he would have moved out, had the schematics, went back to his old house that he didn't live in anymore, and went and hid them up in the attic. Which doesn't make sense. Along with the fake UFO, which that's a piece of evidence someone's going to fucking leave behind. And on close inspection, you can see that they might look similar, but they are not the same craft. Now, there have been many attempts to discredit him, and people have tried to reproduce his pictures, and most of them are failed, terrible jobs at it. Then there's also a lot of controversy over this particular picture, where people found evidence of the light not matching up properly, stuff like that. And for the most part, people are either with their, like, they're split down the middle. Basically, no one can really tell, are they fake? If one of them's fake, then are all of them fake? And what's the whole deal with that? Now, I'd like to present some evidence supporting it, and also some evidence that disproves it. And we'll take a look at the different pieces of evidence that I've come across, and we'll go from there. All right. So first, let's start out with the supporting evidence that I had found. Well, with his amazing pictures of these amazing UFOs, you would think there would be other ones. Well, there are, like these. Now, these come from a man named Paul Shearer in Wisconsin in 2008. Okay. And then this picture comes from Venezuela in 1990, although it looks like it comes from fucking 1960. So that's kind of weird to begin with. Now, although these pictures look similar to Ed's, they are not exactly the same. So they're not the same craft. They look similar, but just as well, they could just as easily be faked, just like his could have been faked. And they were simply piggybacking off of his initial hoax, trying to start or support their own, or use his to support their own hoax photos, stuff like that. Now let's look at some of the evidence I found for disproving it. Well, when I went looking through all the different evidence of this case, and I always feel like the best way to do it is to literally, like, think outside the box and look at the evidence with a new eye for everything. And you have to look in places that people would simply overlook. That's one of the biggest problems, is people overlook the simple things, the easy stuff. And that's where I found it. Now, this is a picture of Rex and Carol Salisbury. They were MUFON investigators who went down to Gulf Breeze, Florida to investigate the case, to reinvestigate it. And they went in with the mind that they're believers in UFOs, but they wanted to have an open mind to whatever the truth was, and whatever evidence they found, they would just let the chips fall where they may, and that's what they would go with. Well, they came out and said that they believed it was a hoax. And then the people at MUFON were like, no, we're just not believing your evidence isn't enough. They didn't have enough evidence of it, or whatever. Well, they were, were with Ed and his family when they were, interviewing him and discussing and searching the evidence and all that stuff. And he was showing them the camera that he took the pictures with. And so they were sitting there, and he's like, yeah, he took a picture of them and gave them the picture. He's like, here you guys go, or whatever. And so, when I was looking around through the evidence or whatever, I stopped at this picture and I realized, I'm like, okay, so he took a picture of them with the camera that he used to take the picture of the UFOs. And so I started to do some adjustments on it, because I noticed something in the background, which was that little bluish line back there. So as I start adjusting the brightness, I'm blasting it with light, the picture, covering it with light, and adjusting the contrast, the sharpness, and saturating the color. And then this image in the background started to appear. So what does that look like to you guys? Well, it looks like the UFO to me. So unless the guys took a picture of the UFO landed right behind them, and then I was like, it looks kind of similar to something else I seen. And I grabbed one of Ed's other pictures, and I looked at that, and I'm like, there's too much, there's something going on. And as I adjusted the pictures and shrunk them and made them equal and everything, didn't I realize 100% what it was? Look at that. That does match perfectly. I would testify in court on this. I mean, you can even see, look at the different points that all line up. That spot up there lines up. the little node on top lines up, the power circle underneath that shit lights up. So I mean, it's completely proportioned. They're the same distance away and everything in each photo. The image is within his camera. It's a double exposure, and that's it. So what else can you say? If one of them's fake, I'm just saying, I fucking busted this one the fuck out. UFO proof out.